Hello everybody, welcome to Chess24 and welcome to my final installment of Game of the Day for Norway Chess. We saw the last round today, round 9. Everything was firmly poised for a brilliant, dramatic finish. Viswanathan Anand trailed the leader Veselin Topalov by half a point. And they were playing each other in the last round, so were Vishy to win, he would have won the tournament. Anything but a win for Vishy would secure Veselin the tournament win. And, well, we'll go into what happened shortly there, or at least the result. But the actual game of the day for many, and the game that I've decided to choose, was the clash of the Norwegians, the second versus the first-ranked Norwegians. Jon Ludvig Hammer, number 2 in Norway. Also Magnus Carlsen, the world number 1, Norwegian number 1 of course. His own second. Jon Ludvig has been working with Magnus as a coach for some time now. And it's been a long time since Jon Ludvig had actually beaten Magnus over the board. In fact, I don't think it was since they were about 10 years old. So the odds of Jon Ludvig causing an upset, especially after having a very difficult tournament, were of course very slim. Nevertheless, Magnus Carlsen got off to a very bad start in this tournament, had a comeback in the second half. The question is, could he continue that against his good friend and second Jon Ludvig Hammer? Let's see what happened. Well, the game started out as a Queen's Gambit declined. And after knight f3, a6 was played by Magnus. He wanted to get something not so theoretical against Jon Ludvig, and rightly so, because, of course, being Magnus's second, he would have checked a number of opening lines, will know Magnus's repertoire inside out. So it was difficult for Magnus, but he found an interesting move on move 3, a6, a move which doesn't commit the pieces of the black position too quickly. That said, as white here against a6, which of course can be a way to transpose into a lot of Queen's Gambit accepted lines after d takes c4, you want to try and punish this move. There is a reason why this isn't played at top level all the time, and I think Jon Ludvig played the right move, the most aggressive move, the move bishop g5. And here the idea is that if black plays, for example, knight f6, we get a weird kind of Rogozin after knight c3, or Queen's Gambit declined main lines where black has included this move a6. Normally the bishop would either be on e7 or b4 here, and you could claim that black has wasted time with this move a6. It doesn't actually contribute to the position. So after bishop g5 as well, black doesn't have too many options here. Bishop e7 looks a bit weird. I think you can just take that and play knight c3 with a pleasant game. So Magnus went for the ultra-ambitious f6. This has been seen before. This isn't a novelty in its purest form, but you'll very rarely see this at top level. It can't be good, objectively, to play like this. That said, you have to prove it. And I suppose it was quite inspiring, actually, when I saw this live, to see Jon Ludvig play the move bishop d2 almost instantly. Not the most obvious move, but it's the move the computer gives, and it might be the most challenging move. It might be a very clever move. Quite a deep idea. It looks like you're putting the bishop on a very odd square. But actually, the point of this is that if now black decides to take on c4, as Magnus did, and white plays e3, when black goes b5, so we get these positions where black tries to hang on to the pawn, actually the bishop now does a great job of stopping, for example, after a4. Were the bishop now on f4, there would be all kinds of bishop b4 checks in the air, which can sometimes slow the white queenside progress down. So the bishop on d2 actually does a good job here. That said, I still think this is the critical reply for black to play with b5. And here after a4, bishop b7, of course a takes b5 was a threat, and maybe now b3. But after the move c5, I'm not sure if black stands that much worse. For example, takes, 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 and now let's say takes, takes, and there's a mass liquidation on the queen side, takes. Something like this could happen, and okay, e6 is on, but a move here, I don't know, bishop d5, for example, knight d5. I'm not sure if black is much worse, so it's an interesting line that would require further investigation. But Magnus, in the spirit of trying to keep things very unique and mixed up, played a move knight c6. I just simply don't like it. Now after bishop takes c4, bishop d6, e4, I think the opening experiment has gone very, very wrong for black. White's got a great centre, black's got a weakness. What is his pawn doing on f6? White's got a number of ways to get developed very naturally, very easy, and I think he's already somewhat better. Magnus played knight g7, castle's castled happened, and Jon Ludvig went for the critical variation, queen b3, immediately putting the question to black, how are you going to defend that pawn on e6? Magnus played perhaps the most interesting move in the position, king h8. He just doesn't want to play passively. He wants to mix things up. Queen d7 perhaps is a move he should have considered, though, but it's a very difficult move to make over the board. So I understand king h8, because actually there's a little trick. The point is that after bishop takes e6, black doesn't just lose a pawn with no compensation at all. He has this brilliant counter shot which Carlsen played, bishop takes h2 check. Now, the point is that if you play knight takes h2, no, black hasn't lost his mind, because knight takes d4 is in the air, and suddenly, whoops, everything falls, black regains the piece with material advantage and probably a winning position. So you have to go king takes h2, after which black regains the piece another way with queen d6 check. White comes back to h1 and bishop takes e6. So black actually managed to regain the piece. And here, though, Jon Ludvig played a very powerful game, but in this particular moment, played correctly, d5. And Magnus retreated with the bishop to g8, given that this is still pinned. So d takes c6 is not possible. And it's here actually the computer gives an incredible suggestion, instead of bishop g8, that the move knight takes d5 might very well work. The point is, after takes, black sacrificed a piece for 2 pawns, but his argument is that actually white, his pieces aren't very well coordinated. He's yet to get the queen side out, and there may be some tricks to take advantage of this, although it's a very, very difficult position to assess, and one that a human, if he's got bishop g8 available to him, just wouldn't go into. But the problem with bishop g8 is this was met by a really strong idea by Jon Ludvig, queen a3. This actually forces the queen exchange now that the queen is out of the pin and d takes c6 is on. So you have to takes, and now actually this knight has got no decent squares. It came back to a7. But after bishop b4, rook f8, let's take, well, maybe flick in rook ac1, rook ac8 for good measure. Again, let's take stock. The knights are awkwardly placed. The pawns in the centre here for white do a good job of hemming in the black pieces. White's got more space. He's got clear targets. White's just better here. And after knight d4, that assessment didn't change. This is a very natural move. You control f5, you look at e6, and black is struggling for counterplay. Magnus, I think, practically speaking, quite rightly played the move f5, trying to do something. He has to try and take on this pawn center in some way. And Jon Ludvig immediately responded with the move f3, the best move. The problem is, if you take on e7 here, after rook takes e7, knight takes f5, rook takes e4, actually suddenly everything falls apart. You've lost your initiative in the center and you can be worse. So f3 was played instead, takes, and now knight g6. So with a similar idea of taking on e4. And here, objectively speaking, I think the move rook fe1 might be the best move. You just keep your pawns. You now threaten to go knight f5 with bishop to c3. g7 is weak, similar to what we're going to see in the game, and white's got a significant advantage. Jon Ludvig decided to force matters with knight f5 straight away. I don't hate the move at all, although objectively I think black probably has got some chances after this, because after takes and bishop c3, actually white threatens mate in 1 with bishop takes g7. Here, again, Magnus played the very human move, bishop takes d5, but this is actually not a good move, or not the best. The move h6 is suggested by the machine, just an outrageous move. The point is you give a bit of luft to the king on h7, and it actually is pretty safe there. So after takes king h7, bishop d4, let's say b6. Now if white wants to try to mix things up even further after d6, c5 actually helps to balance things, and a long fight is ahead. It's not clear that white is much better here at all anymore. But Magnus took on d5, and the point was that after takes king g8, I think he was banking on white playing bishop c3, but actually white had the very nice move bishop d4, threatening mate in 1 and also threatening the knight on a7. Double attack means that only one move was in the position. Rook takes d4, knight takes d4. I'm pretty sure Magnus saw all of this, of course, and assessed that after bishop takes a2, well, he gets 2 pawns for the exchange. He only needs one move to come back with the bishop and he'll be fine. But Jon Ludvig very correctly played the move b3, just highlighting that this bishop can get into some trouble. And it's here where Magnus made a bad move, in my opinion. I think, well, rook f2, rook takes a2, or rook c2, rook takes a2 threatens to win the bishop. So he has to do something immediately. I think the only way to go is to play the move c5. And after this, let's say rook f2, c takes d4, takes. Again, the dust has settled. Some exchanges have happened. And a lot really depends on whether white can win this d-pawn, but it doesn't look that easy. If white can win the d-pawn, he's going to be a lot better and have great chances to win. If he doesn't, if black manages to get active with his king and get his knights coordinated, I think he's got good chances to hold. For example, the move knight f8 is an excellent move here, a computer suggestion, but a brilliant one. The point is that at first sight it looks like, well, hold on, I attack the pawn, black defends, I attack it again. How does he defend it? Well, he doesn't have to, because he's got the really neat move knight to d6 with the idea of coming to e4. And the point is, if knight takes d4, knight e4, and actually suddenly it's white who's worse, because black's attacking the rook and there's nowhere to go. Rook e2, knight g3 check wins the rook that way, and any rook d1 or rook d3 runs into knight f2 check. So amazingly after knight d6, black is fine. But the move rook d8 instead of c5 really was bad, because now after knight e6, this was an excellent move, hitting the rook and maybe threatening to go knight c5. So for example, if rook d6, knight c5, white finds another square to protect this pawn. And now the difference is that if you kick with b6, I beg your pardon, not rook f3, but just rook f2, white is happy to do this exchange, and you've managed to wreck the queenside structure, and white just gobbles up these pawns really easily. And I would expect Jon Ludvig to win this position. So Magnus played rook d2, aiming to keep the bishop like this. But after rook c3, again, another excellent move. Now he protects the pawn laterally and also introduces the idea of perhaps coming over to the king side. For example, after rook e2, knight f4, suddenly this is very uncomfortable. If black takes on f4, rook takes f4, not only is rook takes c7 in the air, but if knight c6, well, that runs into the very nice rook g3 check, whoops, king h8 and rook f8 mate. So actually after knight f4, the position just becomes totally winning. Magnus tried rook b2, but Jon Ludvig took on c7, and after rook takes b3, played rook d1, and we can see the perils of this king. Knight c6, stopping mate, but now rook d to d7, threatening mate again. And that's all she wrote. There's nothing that Magnus can do. He can't bring the rook back to the 8 to defend. And he threw in the towels. So an absolutely brilliant win for Jon Ludvig, his only win of the tournament, but probably the best he could have really wished for given his situation. And the first time he's beaten Magnus in so long. And of course now he can say he's beaten a world champion in a classical game. And it really compounded the misery for Magnus in this tournament. Meant that he finished on 3.5 out of 9. When was the last time we saw that? He sheds around 22 rating points, means that the likes of Anand, Nakamura, Topalov have cut the gap, and he'll be very disappointed. And now what remains to be seen is whether he'll bounce back from this. Going back to what actually happened in the game of the day, well, I actually feel ashamed to even show you what happened there. It ended in a very quick draw. I I understand why it ended in a draw. Topalov with white only needed the draw and went through a very forcing variation. Check out the Chess24 broadcast to see it. It just pains me to analyse it because it ended in a draw after a repetition, probably around, I think it was around move 17, 18. There was a game already played in this exact line with Ivanchuk. And yeah, I mean, Topalov, I can understand. He wanted to close out the tournament. He had a bit of a wobbly finish. Lost yesterday. He wanted to steady the ship and just come home after such a great start. But for Vishy, a lot of people will say, well, why didn't he push? Why didn't he try? And I think Vishy was, the opening that Veselin played didn't really allow for Vishy to play that. And B, he didn't want to throw away such a good tournament by losing in the last game and ruining his tournament. Second place was a great score for him. He got 6 out of 9 plus 3. Gained a lot of rating points, shot up to number 2 in the world on the live list. And his performance, if you'd asked him, would you take that before the tournament? He probably said, yeah, that would be a very reasonable score. It also means that he gets second place in the tour standings, and of course it is a tour, so it's not just this tournament. Cumulative scores do count, and that's what happened. In other news, Hikaru Nakamura scored a great win against Levon Aronian with black. He played a really interesting opening. Levon lost the thread in the middle game somewhere, had to find a series of only moves, didn't. And in the other games, Fabiano Caruana drew against Giri. He was worse at some point, Fabiano, with white, but managed to find a way to liquidate after the time control. And Vasilograf Grishchuk was a draw as well. So, all in all, a fantastic tournament for Veselin Topalov. Congratulations to him, winner of Norway Chess. Vishy Anand and Hikaru Nakamura share second and third with 6 out of 9. Anish Giri had a solid tournament with 5.5 out of 9 plus 2, gaining some rating. And then for the other competitors, it really was a disappointment in many ways. Jon Ludvig Hammer can take some confidence from his finish. Certainly, he'll be happy with his 3 out of 9. He may even be holding rating with a -3 score. He, though, will be joined at the bottom of the table by Levon Aronian, who got 3 out of 9. Levon really has been struggling to show the form we know he's capable of. He's shedding 15 points in this tournament. Alexander Grishchuk and Magnus Carlsen both got 3.5 out of 9. Grishchuk shedding 10 points. Magnus Carlsen shedding a whopping 22.7, probably be rounded up to 23 points. And then Vasilograf and Fabiano Caruana on disappointing tournaments, but not disasters. 4 out of 9 for both. And I believe that is that, ladies and gentlemen. So, hope you've enjoyed my games of the day. Hope you've enjoyed these sessions. Remember to keep your eyes peeled for all the upcoming events we have on Chess24. But from me, for now, it's been a pleasure. Have a great evening. And I look forward to seeing you on Chess24 for the next time. And good night.